Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
When Nati entered the office, Teodora was lying on the floor. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" the woman exclaimed. "I can't even lift you. I'll call someone for help right away." Nati rushed to the manager's department. "Micaelo, Sergio, Pedro, Antonio. Someone, come with me. We need your help urgently." Nati literally broke into the department, clearly showing signs that she was nervous. "What's happened? Can you explain properly? Don't you see how much work there is? If you leave your working place for a minute, Tobias Ray will report you. Then you'll have to explain for why you were absent from your workplace for more than 15 minutes and missed all the client calls," Sergio, the new manager in the department, protested. He had only recently started working there and was afraid of everything. "Come on, let's go quickly. Teodora is not well. She fainted. She's lying alone in her office. I can't even move her to Tobias's computer table," Nati exclaimed. Sergio jumped up and ran with her through the long corridor. He had been in love with the senior accountant from the very first day, but he never showed his feelings. She was a married woman, and her husband also worked in the same department. It was inappropriate to pay attention to someone else's wife. Sergio and Nati rushed into the office. The man lifted the woman onto his arms and carried her to Tobias's workplace. "Should we call an ambulance? Look at how pale she is. What if it's something serious?" Sergio asked, looking at Nati with concern. This wasn't the first time Teodora had fainted. Nati was aware of that. Once, when she came to deliver some reports to Teodora's office, she found her lying on Tobias's table. Her eyes were closed, but as soon as Nati approached her, Teodora responded immediately, saying that she was just tired, that there was no fresh air in the office. What a nonsense! The office always has air conditioning that adjusts according to the outside temperature, Nati thought to herself at the time, but she didn't say anything out loud. She brought a glass of water, left the reports on the table, and left the room. It wasn't her concern. "No need to call an ambulance," Teodora's hoarse voice sounded. "I'm just tired. The weather outside has been so extreme lately. One day it's 30 degrees, and the next day there's rain and thunder. Anyone would feel unwell with such changes. Is Rodrigo still here, or is he out having coffee again? Tell him to come to me if you see him. We should go home, the workday is over. No need to stay late." "All right, Teodora. As soon as I see Rodrigo, I'll tell him to come to you," Nati said. "I've poured you some water. Drink it. I'll go make strong coffee with sugar. You can have some to stop the dizziness." The two girls left the office, and Nati went to the kitchen to make coffee while Sergio returned to his workplace. "Yes, Lucretia, see you later. I'll drop by tomorrow at the same time," Sergio heard Rodrigo's voice as he was leaving the chief accountant's office. In the office, everyone knew about their business conversations. Every day, Rodrigo visited Lucretia's office and spent several hours there. He was the only manager who was consistently absent from his workplace. Tobias Ray checked the cameras every day and mercilessly fined everyone except him. What fines could there be for work-related conversations with Lucretia? It was unclear what the chief accountant and the manager could talk about. Only Teodora, who was so naive, either didn't notice or pretended not to notice the office gossip, as if nothing was happening. What could one say? She didn't want to lose her job, and after all, her husband was not a stranger. They had lived together for 20 years, and everyone has their affairs, right? Affairs that are nothing special. Or perhaps she genuinely didn't notice. How could she keep track of everything? She had an entire department to manage. There was a lot of work, and rumors are just rumors. They are everywhere. "Your wife asked you to come to her office," Sergio said to Rodrigo, closing the door behind him in Lucretia's office. "She felt unwell, fainted. You should go and take her home." "What happened?" Rodrigo tried to look interested. Go, she'll tell you herself. Oh God, what's wrong with her again? When will all this stop? Rodrigo thought to himself as he walked to Lucretia's office. He also noticed that for the past 6 months, Teodora seemed constantly tired. She used to come home from work, cook, and tidy up the apartment. But now she had headaches, felt sleepy, and on weekends, she could hardly get out of bed. She would spend half an hour doing something in the kitchen and then go back to sleep. Maybe it's just seasonal or age-related. No one can understand what's going on in women's heads. He thought. Teodora, what happened again? Giorgio met her in the corridor. I heard from Giorgio that you fainted. Let's get ready to go home. Why are you giving orders? I'll finish my coffee and then we can leave, Teodora replied. My head started hurting because of the sudden weather changes. Don't you see what's happening outside? One day it's hot, the next day it's cold, and I have blood pressure issues, you know. I'm not made of steel, and I'm not young anymore. 20 minutes later, they left the office and headed home. Rodrigo held her hand, pretending to show concern. In reality, he was thinking about how much money from the family budget they would have to spend on doctors to find out what was wrong with her. I can't let this go unchecked. If she collapses completely, she won't be able to work, and we'll still have to pay for it. And I'm not getting any younger. My teeth are all treated and retreated over the years. It's time to start saving for implants, so I won't walk around like an old grandpa in 10 years. It won't cost less than $1 million, he thought to himself as he boarded the bus with his wife. They sat silently all the way home, not uttering a word. Teodora, are you still asleep? It's time to get ready for work. Will you prepare breakfast? I've already taken a shower. We'll eat and then leave. Her husband peeked into the bedroom. Rodrigo noticed that Teodora hadn't set the alarm clock today. Maybe she thought he would wake her up? But I got up almost an hour ago, and she's still sleeping, he thought, somewhat annoyed with himself. No, I'm not going to work today. I didn't even set the alarm clock. I'll call Lucretia and let her know. I'm feeling unwell. We need to call a doctor, Teodora replied sleepily. Why all of a sudden? Everything was fine yesterday. You said it was just the heat, exhaustion. Why do we need to call a doctor? In Rodrigo's voice, there were hints of displeasure that he tried his best to conceal. Well, that's how it is, Rodrigo. I woke up, and everything was spinning, my head was pounding terribly. Maybe it's my blood pressure. Why don't you go and cook yourself some sausages and fry an egg for breakfast? I'll manage here on my own. Call a doctor from the state clinic if you must. The private ones charge around $2,500 just for a house visit. We can't afford to spend so much on doctors, Rodrigo insisted. I'll figure it out, Rodrigo. Have a good day. You can lock the door yourself, okay? Great, now I won't even have a breakfast. Fine, I'll eat out, he thought to himself. Rodrigo quickly got ready and closed the front door behind him. Immediately after he left, Teodora called Lucretia and told her she was taking a sick leave and called for a doctor. The doctor arrived within half an hour. Where can I wash my hands? Asked the stern middle-aged man. Right this way, please, Teodora gestured invitingly towards the bathroom. She could barely stand on her feet. Her head had been spinning since morning, and everything was getting dark in front of her eyes. But she categorically didn't want to ask her husband to stay home. After washing his hands, the doctor entered the room. My name is Jacob. I'm a general practice physician. What's bothering you? He asked, looking at the woman inquisitively. Teodora told him about her fainting episodes and constant headaches. You know, they've been happening periodically, and since yesterday, it just won't go away. I took some painkillers and tried to rest, but my head still hurts. What's wrong with me? It was evident by the look at the woman's eyes that she was sad. She felt so miserable and helpless like never before. For several minutes, the doctor carefully examined Teodora, listened to her, and made some notes on a special card. And what about those bruises on your body? Is your husband hitting you? Jacob asked. No, of course no. Our family is normal. The bruises, well, maybe I bumped into something. Perhaps in public transport or at home. I don't know, she replied softly. And you want to say you didn't notice them? I don't believe it. Yes, of course, I noticed them. They appear and disappear. It happens to everyone. You understand the kind of schedule and pace of life we have. If I went to the doctor every time I had a bruise, I would have to quit my job and only focus on treatments. You said they disappear? Yes, they appear periodically. A few months ago, I had a couple of bruises, then they disappeared. Now they are back. But it's nothing serious, right? I can't give you a definite answer to that question. It's not my field of expertise. However, I can confidently say that bruises don't just appear and disappear for no reason. Most likely, there are blood-related issues. What exactly and how serious it is, a hematologist can determine. I'll write you a referral. You'll need to make an appointment, take the tests they assign, and then we'll see. Are things really that serious? Teodora, I told you only what I see. Dizziness, frequent headaches, fainting episodes, appearing and disappearing bruises, all of these indicate that you may have blood-related issues. Don't panic prematurely. Once you get the test results, everything will become clearer, and then you can decide what to do. The doctor went out of the apartment, leaving her in confusion with a list of referrals in her hands. For the first time in a long while, she was genuinely scared. What if it's really something serious, she thought to herself. On the internet, she found the clinic where she was referred to. Luckily, she could get an appointment with the hematologist tomorrow. To gather strength, Teodora lay down to sleep again. She felt a sudden exhaustion right after the doctor left. Never before in her life had Teodora eagerly awaited a Friday like she did now. This day was supposed to be decisive in her fate. Exactly a week ago, she visited the hematologist and underwent all the necessary tests. The results were due today. Deep down, she hoped that the doctor's worst predictions would not come true. For a week, she couldn't sleep peacefully, dealing with sudden headaches and her thoughts. What if he wasn't wrong after all, and the preliminary diagnosis turns out to be true, she wondered on her way to the clinic. Her condition had been stable during the week, but occasional weakness would wash over her, making her lie down to rest immediately. During these days, Teodora slept almost twice as much as usual. Rodrigo's behavior bothered her. She felt it. He tried to leave home very early and return late, so as not to face his wife unnecessarily. During that time, she didn't even wonder where he spent his time. She didn't care about it. The only thing that mattered to her was her health. When the hematologist shared his assumptions with her, everything else became insignificant and utterly inconsequential. She entered the doctor's office with wobbly legs. It was obvious the doctor was worried. Well, Gilberto, are the results of my tests ready? You said I should come back in a week, Teodora asked straight from the doorway. Come in, take a seat. Don't be so nervous, the doctor replied. I can't give you any joyful news, but hope always exists, so there's no need to despair. Let's discuss everything now. What does that mean? I've reviewed the results of your tests. Unfortunately, all indicators point to leukemia. This is a life-threatening condition, but we still have time to take action. According to my calculations, irreversible consequences will only start in a few months. Until then, we need to address the issue with surgery. It's preferable to do it as soon as possible. What kind of surgery? Like for other patients with a similar diagnosis, a bone marrow transplant could help you. However, you understand that our donor bank is quite limited? It would be beneficial if someone among your relatives is a suitable match. Do you have any relatives? I only have my mother, but she's already elderly. She's 62 years old. Can my mother be a donor? Unfortunately, no. She's too old for such operations. It's contraindicated. Your mother won't be able to be a donor. Do you have any other relatives? Siblings? No, Gilberto. I'm the only daughter in the family. If there are no potential donors among your relatives, then we'll have to wait for results from the donor bank. It's unlikely, but there might be suitable donors found for you soon. We could also send inquiries to foreign donor banks, but you understand that it will cost significantly more than a regular operation with a domestic donor. Gilberto, how is this possible? I'm still relatively young. I'm only 38 years old. I've never had any health issues or abnormalities. I've always been active and lived a healthy lifestyle. How is this happening? I read that such diseases are most common for children, little boys. In most cases, it's hereditary, but everyone in my family is healthy. Teodora, you understand that we can make assumptions, but ultimately, it's up to fate. Medicine is a precise science, but not to the extent of giving a specific explanation for each case. Regarding leukemia, you have a very limited understanding. You might have read books about it. Young boys might suffer from hemophilia, which is hereditary. It passes from mother to son. Leukemia, on the other hand, is a disease that doesn't spare anyone, neither men, women, nor children. It's just that each case is individual, and anyone can be affected. What matters now is to decide what we'll do next. How much will the operation with a domestic donor cost? About $1.5 million. With a foreign donor, it's roughly 3 times more expensive. If I were in your place, I would prepare the money, but not rely too much on the help of a donor from abroad. I'll send inquiries, of course, but a donor from abroad would be a true miracle, just like a domestic one. If anything, do you have the funds to quickly deposit them into the clinic's account and start preparing for the operation? I will try to resolve this matter as soon as possible. I have the means for the operation with a domestic donor. Then, make an appointment for the next examination. I need to monitor your condition. If your health deteriorates, you might need to be hospitalized. I will send the requests to the donor banks today. As soon as there's any information, I'll let you know. Already on her way out of the office, Teodora suddenly decided to ask that one question to find out the thing that now was her mind constantly. Gilberto, tell me, what will happen if we don't find a donor? I'd rather not discuss it. Let's hope for the best. I can only say that the consequences will be irreversible, but you won't fully realize them until the end, just as you won't be aware of what will happen to your body in a few months, calmly replied the doctor. Leaving the clinic, Teodora didn't take the bus. For some reason, she felt like taking a walk and breathing some fresh air. She seemed to have suddenly realized the value of these simple things that she had overlooked for years. Teodora didn't even notice how it got dark. She wandered around almost the entire city center. What a beautiful city! And I never even noticed it before, she thought to herself. She took the subway home. Of course, it would have been more cautious to take a taxi. Who knew, her head might have started spinning again or she might feel unwell, but she really wanted to experience the taste of real life, the smell of the subway that she barely remembered from her student days since she usually took the bus from work to home and used a car for longer distances. She caught herself thinking that she didn't even care how she would tell her husband about it. Deep down, Teodora realized that his reaction wouldn't be too joyous. Doctors, medications, surgery, hospitals, and that's in the best-case scenario, if they manage to find a donor in the next 2 months. And if not, then a slow decline in a hospital room or at home, losing strength, losing appetite, feeling indifferent to herself and the world, and being unable to even get a glass of water on her own. As she approached her home, she decided not to delay the long conversation. She would tell him everything today. After all, they were a family and should have shared all joys and sorrows together. Teodora expected any reaction: anger, despair, incomprehension, non-acceptance of the situation, but not what she had to face. She didn't expect even this, even though she understood that she wouldn't receive sincere support from her husband. "Where have you been for so long?" Rodrigo asked, not even giving Teodora a chance to take off her coat. "I went to the hematologist. The test results came today," she replied with indifference in her voice. "And? What are the results? Have you come up with some non-existent disease again, like a few years ago with infertility?" He sounded mocking in a way that she sometimes hated him for. Their family was never perfect. In their early years, they lived soul to soul, but then, like many others, came the yelling, quarrels, scandals, and then reconciliation. They never resorted to violence, but everything else sometimes seemed to be in excess. "But it's better than being alone," Teodora always thought to herself after another argument, but now, for some reason, she felt repulsed. Not so much by his words, but by herself. If in the past she didn't pay much attention to his reproaches, he would rage and then calm down. Now she felt hurt. And he always believed he was right, even when she went like a crazy person from one clinic to another several years ago, trying to figure out why they couldn't have children. He didn't even consider going with her to get tested. The idea that the problem could be with him never even crossed his mind. "So, what about me? What could possibly be wrong with me? I'm perfectly fine. It's you women who always have some issues with these things. A man is a man. What could possibly be wrong with his health?" He responded more or less like that every time Teodora asked him to get tested. At that time, several doctors all said the same thing about incompatibility, but he seemed not to hear her, or rather, simply didn't want to hear it. What could he have said to her back then if it turned out that he was equally responsible for their situation? So, he conveniently used it to his advantage whenever possible, saying, "You didn't give birth to a son, but I'm still here with you, not going anywhere. You should be grateful." For some reason, at this very moment, the most unfavorable moments of their family life resurfaced in her mind. Over the years, there were many such moments, but there were some that bothered her more than others. And everything that was in any way related to having children fell into this category. He never went through any medical examination, and there were no obstacles found preventing her from conceiving, yet she was the one blamed. "Leukemia," Teodora briefly replied to her husband, passing into the room. "The test results showed that I have leukemia. There's no room for error." The doctor double-checked everything to be absolutely sure. Rodrigo noticeably deflated. He didn't know what to say to that. On one hand, he truly felt sorry for her. He still remembered Teodora as the same young student he fell in love with 20 years ago when they first crossed paths in the university. They studied in different faculties, and their encounter was somewhat fateful, but more so for him than for her. For a simple boy from a poor provincial family, this local city girl with her mother and an apartment in the city center was a real treasure. He couldn't even remember now what prompted him to propose to her after just 6 months of knowing each other. Was it love or the desire to settle down in the capital? He genuinely didn't want her to die, but months of care, expenses on life-sustaining medications, weekends spent in the hospital were not part of his plans. Especially now that he met Lucretia. She was everything he could dream of in a woman. He never expected her to reciprocate, and at first, he even hesitated to show any signs of attention. Everything fell into place on its own. He never even thought about whether Teodora suspected anything. It didn't matter to him. Rodrigo was convinced that even if she found out, she wouldn't divorce him. Men, if married, then only once and for life. If a husband, then he was family, no matter what he did and how he behaved. He knew that. They lived by habit, by the established routine. It suited both of them. And what are the prognoses? What did the doctor say? He asked, staring at one spot. It sounded as if he hadn't thought of what to ask yet. He put me on the waiting list for the donor bank. We'll wait for a suitable donor. In the meantime, I'll have regular checkups with him. He needs to monitor my condition. If my health deteriorates, I'll be admitted to the hospital, Teodora said, somewhat detached. And how do you feel right now? Right now, fine. Please, make some coffee if you don't mind. He went to the kitchen, thinking about how to steer this difficult conversation. How much longer will she live if they can't find a suitable donor? 3 or 4 months? Half a year? But she wouldn't be able to live on her own. In a month, she'd start getting weaker and would need care. I'll have to quit my job and be with her all the time. And then what? He thought to himself. Rodrigo knew that in the event of Teodora's death, he wouldn't get anything. Back then, Tina exchanged her centrally located apartment in such a way that they ended up with 1 2-bedroom and 1 single-bedroom flat. There was no other way to do it. You could get a higher price per square meter only if the apartments were located far away from the city center, and that option was categorically unacceptable to her. She gave the 2-bedroom flat to Teodora, but it was more of a conditional arrangement, on the perspective when she gets married, if they have children. They moved into this apartment right after the wedding, but Tina put it in her name only. She didn't particularly like her son-in-law, but she had to accept her daughter's choice. Rodrigo still remembered that overheard conversation. "Teodora, is he not from around here?" Tina asked, concerned when they went to the kitchen to make coffee. It was the day they met his parents. "No, Mom." "Why does it matter?" "The main thing is that he's a good person," Teodora replied, head over heels in love 20 years ago. Since then, her mother-in-law's attitude hadn't changed. She almost never visited them. To avoid crossing paths, Tina tried not to talk about her daughter's husband in front of her. She didn't want to argue. Now was the moment. "I'll ask directly. What do I have to lose?" Rodrigo thought to himself. "Teodora, your coffee is ready," he said, bringing the tray into the room. "Listen, there's something I wanted to ask you. Did you ever talk to Tina about transferring the apartment into your name?" Teodora understood what this question implied, but she didn't expect such blatant audacity. She thought he would at least have enough conscience to stay with her until the end, at least for the sake of the previous 20 years of their life together, for the fact that she opened the city to him, helped him settle down in a foreign city. For the fact that thanks to her and her mother, he didn't have to return to his provincial town after graduating from the institute due to a lack of money for rent and living expenses, but apparently it wasn't enough for him. Why? How does that change anything? She pretended not to understand what he meant and replied. "It changes a lot, Teodora, you know that very well. You understand what life awaits us in the next 6 months. I'll have to quit my job to take care of you. Soon you won't be able to take care of yourself. If you don't find a donor, it'll be at least 6 months. And if you do find one, then there will be the operation, recovery, all of that not only costs money but also time. And yes, sorry for being so upfront, but if all the efforts and money end up being in vain, do I still have to leave and be on the street?" Rodrigo didn't explicitly mention what would happen if she died, but everything was already more than clear. Due to the headache, she didn't fully comprehend what was happening, so she couldn't react immediately. They stayed silent for about 10 minutes, after which Teodora said, "So, all these years you've been with me because of the city and the apartment, right?" "Teodora, why are you exaggerating everything? My goodness. You're picking a fight out of nowhere, asking questions, interrogating. Of course not. Just try to understand me too. I need guarantees that I won't be left without a job and without a roof over my head. Wouldn't you be concerned if you were in my place?" It was obvious he was angry and dissatisfied. "No, Rodrigo. I would be concerned about what I can do to save my loved one, what I personally can do for that. But apparently, you no longer consider me your loved one. You're living with me out of habit and because you have nowhere else to go," she said so easily, surprising herself with her words. She would have never said something like that out loud before. "What are you saying, Teodora? That's not what I meant at all. Of course, you're my wife, and I love you, and every family has arguments. Are we worse than others? Calm down. Everything will be fine." Rodrigo tried to embrace her. It wasn't advantageous to argue right now. He did his best to smooth over the sharp edge that he had unintentionally revealed. I won't ask my mom to transfer the apartment to me. It will remain her property until my death, or we'll sell it to pay for the donor's services, the operation, and subsequent rehabilitation, Teodora said calmly but firmly. These words infuriated Rodrigo. He slammed his fist on the coffee table, causing the coffee to almost spill from the cup, and then yelled, "Well, sorry, my dear. In that case, I won't be carrying pots for you for 6 months. I don't want to end up a jobless beggar and roam around railway stations in search of food. And I don't want to return to my remote village either. After all, I'm not a kid anymore, I'm 38 years old. I want stability and confidence in my future. Depriving me of that is at least unfair." He stormed off to his room and packed his suitcase. When he left the apartment, Teodora was already asleep. The next day, together with her mother, they changed the locks. "Hello. Aren't you happy to see me?" Rodrigo looked surprised when he saw Lucretia. "Welcome your dear guest. I did what I promised you a long time ago." Lucretia was genuinely shocked. She couldn't put her emotions into words. When they occasionally went to her apartment during work hours to have a proper lunch, she couldn't even imagine that he would remember her address and show up here, especially at such a late hour. "What happened? Why have you turned into a statue? Are you really not happy to see me?" Rodrigo had already crossed the threshold with his suitcase. "Come on, let me in, I'll tell you everything." Well, I don't know." "Yes, of course, come in, it's just that all of this is so unexpected," she finally managed to say. "What happened?" "I left my wife. Now we can live together without having to hide from anyone. Remember, it's what you wanted. We've talked about it so many times, and I never made up my mind, but now I have," he said. "What about Teodora? How is she feeling, by the way?" Lucretia asked. "She called and said she took 2 weeks off from work. It might need to be extended. Is everything okay?" Rodrigo decided not to tell her about the diagnosis. He didn't want her to think he was reacting solely because of Teodora's illness. "Do you want coffee? If you're hungry, you can get some food at the cafe downstairs. I didn't cook anything today, I had no time. I brought some work home with me. There were a few things I needed to finish in the office," Lucretia said nonchalantly. Inwardly, she was only thinking about how to phrase it politely that she never intended to have any serious relationship with Rodrigo. Of course, she asked him when he would leave his wife and made plans for a future together, but it was all just for show. All mistresses asked those questions, otherwise, what kind of mistresses would they be? Giving the impression of being interested was one of the main strategies in their game. In reality, her life suited her perfectly. She had been living alone for many years, had grown accustomed to it, and didn't need cohabitation. "Okay, I'll just tell the truth. Why should I be afraid?" she thought to herself. "Rodrigo, well, you see. In short, you can stay at my place tonight, but then you should find an apartment for yourself. Your salary allows for it. We'll continue seeing each other as we used to. I can come to you, and you can come to me. We'll stop hiding at work. Maybe in the future, we can live together," Lucretia began. "Wait, I don't understand. What do you mean by stay for one night? How is that possible?" he asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "What about our plans together? What about all those when you leave your wife, Rodrigo, I only love you, we'll live together without hiding from anyone? Were all of those lies? Understand me correctly, it doesn't work like that. You need to plan and think everything through in advance. What's happening now is just hasty. You left Teodora yesterday, and today you're moving in with me? What will people say? By the way, I have a significant position. I don't want to lose my reputation in the eyes of my colleagues. And what about the fact that we're seeing each other? Doesn't that affect your reputation? Well, firstly, no one knows about that yet. And secondly, we'll gradually make our relationship public. We'll say that you and Teodora have split, and we're just friends, like colleagues. Later on, we can reveal more. Lucretia, people aren't blind. Everyone already knows everything. Or do you think they don't understand what we're doing in the office during work hours and why I go there so often, being absent from my workplace for half a day? The lies looked extremely ridiculous. The arguments were funny and obviously false. Lucretia understood that as well, and that everyone already knew everything. But she couldn't come up with anything else. Okay, Rodrigo, I've said it all. If you want, you can stay overnight today. If not, go to a hotel or rent a place for a day. It's time to sleep. I have to wake up early for work, and I still need to finish reports by morning. I'm constantly sleep deprived. If you decide to stay, there's bedding and other things in the room near the kitchen, Lucretia said, then went to her room. All right, she's right. I do have to wake up early in the morning. I'll spend the night at her place, and tomorrow we'll talk more, Rodrigo thought to himself. He couldn't even imagine they would have nothing to talk about. If he expected betrayal from anyone, it certainly wasn't from her. They went to work separately. Lucretia left much earlier than him. When Rodrigo woke up, there was a note on the table, "You'll find something to eat in the fridge. Coffee is in the left cupboard. If you're leaving, take your suitcase with you. Pull the door handle up to lock it." She didn't leave him any keys. It was clear she didn't expect him to return. Damn. I need to find another place to leave the suitcase so that no one at work asks unnecessary questions, he thought to himself. Rodrigo called several hotels near Lucretia's place. The prices were very high, and there were hardly any available rooms. Only one was left. He took his things there and headed to work. The office was a short distance from Lucretia's home, so he managed to do everything and even arrived on time. Rodrigo, come to my office, Tobias approached his workstation. I need to have a very serious talk with you. I wonder what the boss needs from me. I didn't even arrive late for work today. What could they possibly have to complain about? Rodrigo thought to himself. The request made him nervous, but he tried his best to appear perfectly calm. Tobias, may I? He said, slightly opening the door to the office. You should knock before entering, the boss replied. Come in and close the door behind you. I'm all ears, Tobias. Here's the situation that's not looking good for us. Overall, you've been absent from your workplace for more than 5 working days during the month. It's all recorded on the surveillance cameras. Moreover, you've been away for more than 4 consecutive hours during a single workday. You understand that this is a valid reason for dismissal, don't you? But that's not the most crucial point. Upon hearing these words, Rodrigo turned pale. He didn't understand what was happening. Tobias was well aware that he frequently wasn't at his workplace. He knew the reason, but he never mentioned it. The relationship with Lucretia had long been a reason for gossip and coffee talks, but was also a taboo topic. Now look at the statistics of your personal sales of components for the last quarter and compare it to how much you've sold personally this quarter, Tobias continued, laying out printouts with graphs on the table. Your results have dropped exactly 3-fold, which is the most unsatisfactory performance within the department. Not to mention that we solely process incoming requests, and you've missed exactly 100 of them this month. You haven't answered some incoming calls for several hours, which resulted in numerous complaints to the support and quality control hotline. What do you have to say in your defense? Tobias, but you know everything yourself. What do you want to hear from me? Lucretia often called me to discuss profits. What are you talking about? What profits? Do you even have an idea of what the chief accountant does? Stop lying and twisting the truth. He indeed had a rather mediocre understanding of what the chief accountant did and what responsibilities he had, just as he did about the entire accounting department. He didn't even know what his wife Teodora was responsible for. He blurted out the first thing that came to his mind, and it was a terrible blunder. Will you write the resignation yourself, or should we proceed with the dismissal? Tobias looked sternly at the crestfallen Rodrigo. What? What dismissal? What are you talking about? Rodrigo couldn't believe his ears. Well, fine. Just fine me like you do to other employees who are absent from their workplaces. But firing? I haven't done anything wrong, Tobias. Even if we deduct your salary for the last 6 months, it won't cover even 5% of the losses you've caused to the company. Write your resignation. If you do it yourself, at least you won't have a mark of disgrace in your employment record. You might find some small firm to work for. But don't you dare come to me for any recommendations for a new job. Rodrigo realized he had no other choice. This is all because of Lucretia, he thought to himself. She decided to throw me out not only from her life, but also to deprive me of my job entirely? In the capital, in small companies, all salaries were paid under the table, and if they paid anything at all, it was barely enough. There were no social benefits, sick leave, or vacations, and most of the salaries are laughable. He knew that finding a job in a large company was unlikely. Almost everywhere they required recommendations from the previous employer, especially in such a specialized field. You can collect your employment record from the HR department after lunch, Tobias said, signing the resignation letter. Honestly, I never expected this from you. If it weren't for Teodora, I would have fired you a long time ago. And without her endorsement, I would have never hired you in the first place. Your resume was weak, and your work experience too, but she insisted so much that I thought you'd be a decent person. But alas. Goodbye, Rodrigo. He couldn't believe she betrayed him. She didn't want to be together, but why she acted like this? I wasn't imposing. I came late at night, yes, wanting to move in with her, but what's wrong with that if she herself talked about it many times, asking about divorcing my wife? He thought on his way to the hotel. Going back to Teodora would be foolish, and she probably wouldn't recover quickly after everything that happened. Rodrigo was ready to do anything to avoid the difficulties he hadn't faced in many years. He had a good roof over his head, a wife with a decent salary, and comfort. He earned well enough himself, but he never saved anything. He believed that if he hadn't become a millionaire, there was no point in saving money. It would just be spent on this and that. And that's exactly what happened. I haven't been to my hometown in a long time, Rodrigo pondered, lying in the hotel room. It's time to visit my mother and sister. He opened the site, checked the tickets, and found a departure at 3 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., he was already there. Fernanda, it's your brother. Aren't you happy to see me? Where's Mom? Rodrigo said from the doorway when his sister opened the apartment door. Are you going to keep me in the hallway? Step aside. An elderly woman came out of the room. Rodrigo is here. It's been 100 years since he visited us. Totally forgot about his mother while living in the capital, Eugenia welcomed her son. Hello, Mom. I'm here on vacation, Rodrigo replied as he went to his room to unpack his things. Come on in. Let's have some coffee. You can tell us about your life and Teodora, Eugenia said warmly. His mother genuinely rejoiced to see him, but his sister Tina looked at him with reproach. She knew what kind of person he was, but her mother always felt sorry for him, though Tina had no remaining familial feelings for him and was not happy to see him, making no effort to hide it. Mom, let's look at the situation realistically. You won't be able to sell the apartment so quickly, Teodora tried to explain her thoughts to Tina. We need to find the money elsewhere or be put on the waiting list for a domestic donor. We can't afford this sum, we have no way to get it. So, we'll have to wait until a suitable domestic donor appears and then immediately pay for the surgery so that we won't be left behind. Teodora's condition deteriorated sharply a week ago. She had been in the hospital under the observation of doctors for 2 weeks. Tina visited her every day and tried to find the money, hoping to give them a chance to pursue the surgery with an overseas donor. The doctors no longer gave any hopeful prognosis. If anything, the chances were diminishing every day. Teodora was growing weaker. Most of the time, she just slept, waking up only to eat, but sometimes she had no appetite even for that. There was still no news from the donor bank. The doctor warned that the registry was small, the number of new donors was not only limited, but also not all of them would be suitable. Deep down, Teodora held on to hope, but with each passing day, it seemed more like an illusion. It's hard to admit to oneself that you are doomed. Perhaps, it's the most difficult thing a person can face. Rodrigo never called once, not even to inquire about her well-being. Teodora was sure he would return, as he had nowhere to go in the capital, and he couldn't just erase 20 years from his life. She hoped that his words about pots and the apartment were said on impulse, that he didn't really mean it. He was just hurt that after all these years, he still couldn't build a successful career. He wanted guarantees, and she could understand that. Teodora felt sorry for her husband, and he just disappeared, forgetting both her and the years they spent together. He was still considered her close relative by law, but in reality, he was already no one. She tried not to think about it. She couldn't handle it. In the last days, everything boiled down to waiting for a donor. The illness progressed, and there was nothing she could do about it. What if we put the apartment up as a loan deposit, or sell it and repurchase it later? I heard about that, Tina Tobiasovna suggested. Mom, what loan deposit? What repurchase? What are you even talking about? Teodora replied. At best, you'll get 30% of the apartment's value. If you find someone to quickly buy it, they'll offer the lowest price. Besides, all these organizations and so-called investors are full of criminals, and you know that. Do you want to get involved in something like that? We must do something. The woman couldn't calm down. Maybe we should apply to the bank. They do provide loans against real estate. Oh sure, and then how will we repay it? Don't forget that even though I continue to receive my salary on sick leave, it's definitely not enough to cover such a loan. And if the bank agrees to give such a sum, it'll be at very high interest rates and for a short term. No, Mom, these options won't work out. We need to come up with something else, Teodora replied. Tina looked at her in amazement. Despite her condition, Teodora could still think, consider different options, analyze and reject unprofitable choices. Anyone else in her place would have panicked long ago, thrown a fit, and only talked about the inevitable end. Any person would agree to give up not just the apartment, but everything they had for life, but Teodora managed to think even in such a complex situation, worrying not only about herself, but also about the family property, for which her mother and father had worked their entire lives. Knock, knock, can I come in? A man with fruits entered the room. Teodora, look, Giorgio came. Tina said cheerfully. He had been visiting her frequently since he learned about her illness. Rumors spread quickly in the office. The bad news reached their department about a week after Teodora went on sick leave. He wanted to call her on the first day, but then he thought it would be inappropriate. After all, she was a married woman, and both she and her husband probably wouldn't appreciate a stranger getting involved in their lives through his help. But when Rodrigo was fired, Giorgio decided to at least find out if she needed any financial assistance. After getting her number from Lucretia, who surprisingly gave it to him without contacting Teodora first to check if it was appropriate, he called her the same evening. It turned out Rodrigo was not around, and her health was gradually worsening. The day after their conversation, she was taken to the hospital. Teodora, how are you feeling? I brought you some fruits. I don't know, ask the doctor if you can eat them. I wouldn't want to make things worse with my good intentions, Giorgio said with a touch of genuine concern in his voice. By the way, I have some news for you. I'm not sure yet if it's good or bad. You'll decide on your own. Tell us, Giorgio. Right now, we need good news like breathing in the air, Tina smiled. If she didn't immediately harbor any sympathies for Rodrigo, Giorgio, for some reason, impressed her from the first moment they met. They had known each other for a short time, yet Tina already made it clear that she wouldn't mind if something developed between them and Teodora in the future. Teodora herself hadn't even thought about it. She was undoubtedly grateful to Sergio for his support and friendship, but nothing more. Deep down, she was constantly thinking about Rodrigo. Could it be true that 20 years ago, he proposed to her just for the apartment and had been living with her all these years only to avoid going back to his small town? These thoughts haunted her. How could she have been so wrong about a person? I sent letters to several charitable foundations, explaining our urgent and critical situation, emphasizing how crucial it is for us to have the opportunity to undergo the operation with a foreign donor. Additionally, I wrote a letter to the program Heavy Human Fates. They often help raise funds for surgeries and treatment for seriously ill patients, Sergio continued. Oh, come on. That's all a scam. They pay money to the audience just to come to the studio, tell their stories, and boost their ratings. Do you want us to make fools of ourselves on national television? Tina clearly didn't like Sergio's suggestions. First of all, you've misunderstood everything. And secondly, you are absolutely wrong. What's wrong with us going on that program to save Teodora? On the contrary, it could help us raise a substantial amount in a short time. And lastly, Tina, nobody has replied yet, no one has made an offer, and no one has invited us anywhere. We just need to do something. I can't sit idly by, Sergio responded. Sergio, thank you so much for your support, for being there, for everything. You're not just a good person, you're a true friend who won't abandon us in times of trouble, Teodora said, looking at him with genuine and sincere gratitude. Their conversation was interrupted by a doctor entering the room. Hello. I have good news for you. Tina, come with me. We need to talk, said Gilberto. The woman left the room and followed the doctor. We received a response to our application. There's a donor from the foreign database, Gilberto said without preamble. But you understand that we are not alone in this. There are other people who are also eligible for the operation with this donor. To reserve the donor for yourself, you need to pay at least 20 to 30% of the total cost. That way, we can perform the operation a week after all the necessary paperwork is completed and the donor material is delivered to our country. But you know that we don't have the full amount on hand right now. We only have a portion. What if we pay the deposit, but we can't find the remaining funds? Tina asked. Then you'll have to decline the operation, and the donor material will be assigned to another patient. Make your decision. There's no time for hesitation. I need to talk to my daughter, Tina replied. I'll be waiting for you in my office in 15 to 20 minutes. Try to make a decision quickly so I can confirm the application, and we won't be overtaken. The data updates every hour, and if there's another patient willing to pay the entire amount up front, they might get ahead of us. Tina felt both relieved and anxious at the same time. Of course, they had to accept the offer. There might not be another chance. In a month, the countdown might go from weeks to days. Teodora, Gilberto has good news for us, Tina rushed back into the room. They found a donor with a suitable match abroad. We can have the surgery in just a week. We can pay in installments. We have the necessary amount to make the deposit for the foreign clinic to prepare all the documents and for the donor to come. But what about the rest of the money? Where will we get them? Teodora asked in surprise. We don't have the full amount. It won't just magically appear out of thin air. Teodora, do you even understand what you're talking about? It feels like you're in some sort of daze. You're lying here, on a hospital bed. You sleep most of the time, and your days are numbered. What sums? What money? What are you even thinking about? Tina was getting visibly angry. If needed, I can put our apartment up as a loan deposit. So be it. We'll live in a smaller one. It's not a big deal. Yes, we might lose some money, but I only have one daughter, Tina said. I can contribute an additional $500,000. I have savings. And then we'll need to find another $1,500,000 plus additional expenses, which I calculated to be around $300,000, Giorgio said. Tina, go and tell Gilberto that we agree. Let them start drawing up documents. Teodora was amazed by Giorgio's gesture. A complete stranger, barely acquainted with her, was willing to give up his savings to save her life. She thought about Rodrigo again and felt sad. Maybe he doesn't even think about me. He doesn't care about what happens to me, how I am. If the apartment was in my name, he would have been here every day, caring for me. But now, he's nowhere to be found, she thought to herself. What are you thinking about? Giorgio interrupted her thoughts. It's just so incredible. They found a donor. I'll have the operation and I'll recover. Everything will be fine, she replied. I can't even believe it, to be honest. Where will we find the remaining amount if we can't use the apartment as a loan deposit? No one will give us a loan. And if that's the case, the operation will have to be canceled. And then what? Well, you know it all too well. You heard what Gilberto's prognosis was. There's nothing comforting about it, sadness returned to Teodora's eyes. You're not even thinking about the right things. All you focus on is sadness and sorrow. Instead, think about the good, about starting over when you recover. It's such a rare stroke of luck. Some people wait for donors for months, and some don't even get the chance. And we'll find the money. I told you I sent letters to charitable foundations. I'll send more today. Maybe we'll get lucky again, and one of the foundations will agree to open an urgent fundraiser, Giorgio encouraged. Excuse me for interrupting. Teodora, you need to sign the documents. Shall I bring them here, or can you walk to my office? Gilberto asked through the partially open door. I can walk to your office. I'll come right away, Teodora replied. The documents were ready. Tina went to the bank to transfer the money. As a habit, she kept the funds not in an account but in a bank safe deposit box. Well, at least she didn't have to worry about the bank refusing to issue a large sum from her account on such short notice. Once again, she praised herself for her foresight. At one point, on her mother's advice, Teodora started saving money in a separate account. She thought that when her mom became very old and frail, she could use that money for her care. Teodora had saved up this money with the thought of her mother in mind. Little did she know that fate would take such a turn, and it would be her in need of help. All right, Teodora, I'll go now. You rest. I'll definitely come to see you tomorrow. Tina and I will take turns so that neither of us gets too tired, Giorgio said with a smile. Okay, Giorgio, see you later. Thank you again for your support and friendship, Teodora replied. When he got home, Giorgio noticed several missed calls. The subway was an area with no signal, so he hurriedly called back the unfamiliar numbers. Good day. Did you apply? A young woman's voice came from the other end of the line. It was the call he had been hoping and waiting for. Good evening, Giorgio. My name is Marina. You applied to our charitable foundation, Victory Together, for raising funds for Teodora Soto's bone marrow transplant surgery, the female voice on the phone explained. We are ready to organize targeted financial assistance once you provide the necessary documents. Good evening. Yes, I submitted the application. Thank you so much. You have no idea what you've done for us. What documents do I need to bring, and where should I come? Giorgio asked, feeling excited. You can come tomorrow between 9 o'clock and 2000 hours to Central Alley, Building 22, Office 315. The entrance is from the courtyard, through a large iron door. It will have the name of our charitable foundation on it. Please bring your passport, bank account details, a medical card with a clinic stamp, and a diagnosis listed on it, Marina explained. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be there tomorrow. He couldn't believe that his letters had yielded results. It was simply incredible. He immediately called Tina and Teodora. The doctor needed to prepare the medical card by tomorrow, and the sooner, the better. Teodora, is Gilberto still there? Giorgio's voice was filled with excitement. You won't believe it. The Victory Together Charity Foundation is ready to open a fundraiser for us. It's like a real miracle. We'll have the full amount by the time of the operation. Yes, he's still here. I already asked him. He said he would prepare everything by tomorrow morning. Come around 10. I'm sure he'll have everything ready by then, Teodora replied. Giorgio, thank you so much. Okay, see you tomorrow. I'll be there at 10 a.m. straight. For the first time in a long while, there were cheerful notes in her voice. He believed that everything would work out. There were kind people in the world. At 10 a.m., he was already at the clinic and then went straight to the charity foundation. They attached the introductory documents to the website and posted them in all social media groups. Can you tell me, have you already tried raising funds through other charitable foundations? Or maybe you attempted to gather money through social media independently? The staff member asked. No, I thought about starting to raise funds on my own, but then I decided that it would not only be too risky, but it would also be unlikely to gather the required amount in such a short time. You know how many scammers there are out there. I trust official organizations more, Giorgio replied. You did the right thing. We're glad you reached out to us. Could you please tell me, approximately how long does it take to gather such an amount? We have opened a fundraiser for $2.5 million. It's more than you initially requested, but we're taking precautions this way. Who knows, Teodora Soto might need to cover additional expenses related to the operation. If there's a need for recovery and rehabilitation funds, we can open a separate fundraiser for that. I understand. Thank you very much. And the funds will be transferred to your account, right? Yes, all funds go to the Charity Foundation's account. Every day, we will send you a report on the amount that has been collected. Once the fundraiser is closed, we will transfer all the money to your provided details. Excuse me, what if it's not possible to gather the full amount by the specified date? In that case, we will transfer the funds that have been collected. Either way, you will be able to use them as needed. After closing the fundraiser, we will publish all the necessary reports on our website and social media. Okay, I understand. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Giorgio. We will send the reports on the collected amounts to your email and through SMS notifications. Giorgio had never been happier. Immediately after leaving, he headed back to the hospital to see Teodora. He wanted to tell her everything himself. As he was getting out of the subway, his phone rang. I'm listening, Giorgio answered. Good day, Giorgio? This time, a stern male voice came from the other end of the line. Yes, it's me. My name is Arturo. I'm the editor of the program These Heavy Human Fates. You wrote a letter to us. We would like to invite you and your friend to participate in our live broadcast. You know, we have already made arrangements with the Charity Foundation for fundraising, and Teodora, the woman who urgently needs the operation, unfortunately cannot participate in any programs right now. She's in the hospital, preparing for the surgery, and feeling very unwell. Are you kidding? Is there a chance of recovery? Yes, of course, there is more than just a chance. She will definitely get better. Can you hear me? Definitely. Could you go alone? Our viewers would be very interested to hear the story of this brave woman, even if not from her directly. Teodora could become an example for thousands of women across the country. You know, I need to discuss this with Teodora. Now, I think it would be more appropriate to do so. Yes, of course. Call me back at the number that appeared on your incoming call. The extension number is 3315. All right, thank you. Goodbye. This call was no longer of critical importance. The most important thing was done. He had arranged things with the Charity Foundation. Television popularity wasn't crucial in this situation. but when he arrived at the hospital, he still asked Teodora what she thought about it. You know, Giorgio, I don't mind at all. My mom is skeptical about such programs, but I, on the contrary, support them. If they chose your letter out of hundreds of thousands, then of course, you should go, she said. You can openly talk about everything there. I approve of it. Maybe my story will really inspire someone. If the surgery is successful, and I do end up living, then I will come to their show myself if they invite me, of course. I wanted to ask, how is your work going? You keep coming to me all the time. You might get fired. I took unpaid leave. Listen, what difference does it make? Let them fire me if they want. It's not like it's my first job. Of course, it will be unpleasant if there's a note of dismissal in my employment record immediately after the probationary period. I only started working there 4 months ago. But it's not critical. I have a lot of experience. I'll find another job if needed. Right now, the most important thing is you and your health. Teodora's mood improved with each passing day. She seemed to have started hoping for something better and brighter in her life, something she hadn't had for many years. And it wasn't just about her health. The week flew by like a single moment. The charity foundation managed to raise not only the required amount for the second payment of the operation, but even more. After Giorgio appeared on the TV program, compassionate viewers sent money to the foundation's account as well. These funds would be kept for recovery or in case a repeat operation was needed. Tomorrow already, he thought to himself. He would spend the entire next day in the hospital. Giorgio and Tina arrived at the hospital early in the morning. The operation was scheduled for 3 p.m., so they had time to see Teodora. Mom, why are you worried? It's not some complex surgery with stitches and a lengthy recovery period. It's only 2 hours. Then I'll rest, and the next day, I'll be able to walk, eat, and talk on my own. Everything will be like before, except I'll feel better than I have in the past few days, Teodora comforted Tina. She wasn't afraid at all, that was true. What did she have to be afraid of? The last few days were a distant memory for her, constant headaches and sleep. Sometimes she couldn't even wake up to eat. She felt so weak. Chemotherapy had negatively affected her condition. Teodora really wanted all of this to be over as soon as possible. But what about a whole year of recovery? What if the donor bone marrow doesn't take? We'll have to do another operation. Tina couldn't calm down. She had been very anxious all week, and that feeling hadn't gone away. Mom, why think about the worst? We should focus on the good. Gilberto will monitor my condition. If something goes wrong, there will be another operation. That's life. Nothing can be done about it, Teodora reassured Tina. Your words are like a prayer, Teodora. I'll probably intervene in your conversation, Giorgio started. Tina, why are you really so worried? It seems that Teodora was right when she said we shouldn't come today. Why wouldn't I worry? We've spent so much effort. What if it's all in vain? What if the woman continued to share her anxieties? Tina, may I talk to Teodora alone? Giorgio asked. Are you kicking me out? The woman looked offended. All right, fine. I'll wait in the hall. He decided to say it now, without waiting for the operation to end. Giorgio had long since made up his mind about everything. Teodora, I wanted to tell you. When all of this is over, when you recover and start a new life, consider marrying me. I'm not insisting or expecting an immediate answer from you. Just if you ever respond to my feelings with mutual affection, I'll be happy. He took a ring out of his trouser pocket and extended it to her. Teodora understood that sooner or later their relationship would transition from being friends to something more significant, but she didn't expect it to happen so quickly. She didn't know what to say. Everything in her life was happening too fast, and she was already thoroughly confused about her feelings. Remember, I said I don't expect an answer right now. I don't expect any hasty decision. If someday you realize that you need me, know that I love you and will wait for you as long as it takes. A year, 2, or even longer. Just know that. And during your recovery, I'll be by your side. I'm sorry, but it's time for us to prepare for the surgery. Gilberto entered the room without knocking. Giorgio and Teodora didn't even notice that they had been talking for almost an hour. Tina spent an equal amount of time comforting them. Please, you should leave the room. Yes, of course. I'm leaving. Giorgio got up from the chair and headed towards the exit. Good luck, Teodora. Gilberto, can we talk with you for a moment? Tina and I have a few questions for you. All questions and discussions can wait. Teodora will need some rest after the surgery. You can visit her tomorrow, and we can discuss whatever you're interested in then. Giorgio and Tina left the clinic and headed home. They just had to get through this day. There was nothing more they could do. When Giorgio entered the room, Teodora was still asleep. He decided not to wake her. It was hard to imagine what she had been through yesterday. Tina and I were constantly thinking about ourselves, our worries, and anxieties, and for some reason, we never really thought about what she was feeling. Not in terms of physical well-being, but how she felt deep down, he thought to himself. He wanted to hear the truth from Gilberto, and nothing but the truth. Normally, doctors don't tell everything to mothers and close relatives to avoid premature panic. But he needed to know everything exactly as it was. Gilberto, may I come in? Giorgio partially opened the door. I told you yesterday that I really need to discuss Teodora's condition with you. I want you to tell me the truth, exactly as it is, without sugarcoating anything. Please, have a seat. Gilberto gestured for him to sit. I am a doctor, and telling the truth is my direct and immediate duty. I have no intention of hiding anything from you. I never even considered doing so. How did the surgery go? Will she survive? You must understand that the donor bone marrow is not a direct match, so the success of the surgery doesn't solely depend on the procedure itself, but also on the engraftment of the donor material. I will be monitoring Teodora's condition for the next 3 months, during which time she will most likely remain in the hospital. It may even take longer. Rejection of the donor material can occur even after 6 months. We need to be prepared for that. And what happens then? In case of rejection, we'll have to repeat an operation. We already have an arrangement with a foreign donor. I explained the situation when I was in the early stages of negotiations, so we have a donor for a potential repeat operation. In this case, you will only need to provide the necessary funds. The repeat surgery will cost approximately the same, but let's not speculate and, even more so, expect the worst. We should hope for the best. I've done everything I could. That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you. Tell me, can we visit Teodora just like before? Yes, of course. But in the first few days after the surgery, it's better to limit the visits. She needs rest and tranquility. Giorgio felt relieved. Gilberto's words gave him hope. Now he was confident that Teodora would live. That was the most important thing. Did you wake up? Giorgio asked quietly as he entered the room. Yes, I'm awake, Teodora replied with a smile on her face. How are you feeling? Well, not bad. The only thing is that I'm feeling weak, of course, but Gilberto said it's normal. I need more sleep and rest. Yes, he's absolutely right. I won't stay long. I'll come to see you every day. Tobias Ray called. He asked me to urgently end my leave and come to talk to him. He's probably planning to fire me. Why do you think that? You've only been away for 2 weeks, and you informed him and submitted the paperwork. Everything's official. On the other hand, Lucretia will probably fire me. Well, she won't wait for a year until I return to work. Her whole department would collapse. Have you talked to her yet? What? When? I haven't had time for that. Anyway, I need to rest. My head is throbbing, and everything is blurry before my eyes. When you talk to Tobias, please call me, okay? Sure, I will. I'm gonna go. Giorgio hadn't expected this reaction from Tobias. It turned out he knew everything about Teodora's situation and how Rodrigo had treated her so unfairly. How does everything become known in the office so quickly? It's like people come here not to work, but to drink coffee and gossip, he thought to himself with a smile, listening to his boss's sympathetic tone. Tobias didn't fire him. On the contrary, he offered the optimal solution Giorgio had already been considering but hadn't dared to ask for. Managers could work on a rotating schedule, albeit at half the salary, but with job security. 2 days of work, 2 days to visit Teodora and take care of her. On the remaining days, Tina could visit her. It was hard to come up with anything better in this situation. Lucretia didn't resort to cruelty either. A week after the surgery, she contacted Teodora herself and offered her the option of working remotely after the main rehabilitation period. In just 3 months, Teodora could return to work. You see. And you were worried, saying, she'll fire me. Tobias is a decent person, he understands everything. As you can see, our team don't abandon honest and loyal employees in a time of need, Teodora smiled. Thank you for coming. It seems like you don't have any days off. Maybe you should take a break? No, I'm not tired, Giorgio waved it off. Listen, there's something I wanted to ask. He paused because he didn't know how to say it. Well, go on. What is it? What will you do about Rodrigo? After the rehabilitation, I should definitely file for divorce to avoid unnecessary paperwork later on. And after everything I've been through, I've realized that I want to be free. Can we do it remotely? I wonder. We don't have children, and there are no property claims either. We should get divorced. I'll find out. Actually, I was just asking. What if he comes back and asks for forgiveness? No, he had the opportunity. He never took it. Now I'm not ready to forgive him. Just tell me honestly, did you know about his affair with Lucretia? I mean, everyone in the office knew. Didn't you notice? Honestly? I suspected. Actually, not just suspected, but understood that it was true. But I decided not to pay much attention to it. After all, we've been together for a long time. All men cheat, so what makes mine any different? Though, usually mistresses are younger, but he must be a special kind. Or maybe he was counting on some privileges. I don't know. It's not my concern anymore. She had decided that solitude would be the best option for her, at least for the time being. Giorgio understood this without words. He was willing to wait. He was sure that with time, she would overcome everything that happened to her, and then, perhaps, they could be happy together. For years passed. Drunk again? There's no hope left for you. You drove our mother to her grave, and now you're going down the same path. Fernandez shouted at Rodrigo. When will you start living normally? As soon as you came back from the capital, it all started again. I've been putting up with you for 4 years now. Mother passed away 6 months ago. What a person she was. Rodrigo stumbled into the corridor with another bottle. Anyway, Fernanda, prepare dinner. I'll go watch TV for a bit. I'm tired. Tired, huh? Tired of your drinking and partying, that's what you're tired of. You've worn yourself out, poor thing. For 4 years, Rodrigo had been unemployed, living off his mother's and sister's money, and surviving on occasional odd jobs, just to have enough for alcohol. Good evening, dear viewers. This is the program Heavy Human Destinies on air, and I'm your host, Andres. A loud voice of the announcer echoed from the room. Can't they show some series instead? They'll probably just show troubled families and raise money for poor children, Rodrigo thought to himself, but he had no energy left to change the channel. Well, let's watch this nonsense. I guess I have to socialize somehow. 4 years ago, Giorgio from the capital turned to our program, the host continued. He told us the story of his friend who inspired thousands of our viewers to fight against oncology. Our viewers also took part in raising funds that were used for Teodora's rehabilitation after a bone marrow transplant surgery. Now she is not only completely healthy, but her life has changed drastically. Could you please tell us, how did you go through the most difficult stage and manage to overcome the illness? And what else has happened in your life? You know, they say life ends at 40. But I can tell you something completely different. Life only begins at 40, and I am a perfect example of that. Teodora's face beamed with a smile. I see you didn't come to the studio alone today. You are accompanied not only by your beloved husband, but also this adorable little girl, the host continued. Yes, you see, in the last few years, so many wonders have happened in my life that I can't even remember that past life with leukemia, the surgery, the long 8 months of recovery, and the betrayal. Teodora continued her story. When the doctor finally said that the donor bone marrow had engrafted successfully, I was on cloud 9 with happiness, and so were my mom and Sergio. It meant that I would live. But a year after all of that, another miracle happened in my life. Well, here she is, right in front of you. My daughter, Nora, is a true miracle. She's still little, but she'll grow up soon. This is your first child, right? Weren't you afraid to decide on it, considering your mature age and health condition? The doctor said that leukemia, even if I hadn't undergone the operation by that time, wouldn't have affected the baby. I could have given birth even with that condition. But fortunately, I became pregnant when I was already healthy. Yes, Nora was a much-wanted and long-awaited child. In the 20 years I lived with my ex-husband, unfortunately, I couldn't become a mother, but I really wanted to. You mentioned betrayal. Did you mean your ex-husband? As far as I know, he left you as soon as he found out about the illness, and after some time, you officially divorced. How are your relations now? Yes, you said it correctly. We lived together for 20 years, got married back in our college days. My mom provided us with a 2-bedroom apartment when we moved in. It turned out he stayed with me all those years because of the apartment. I even helped him with job issues, but as soon as difficulties arose, he left. But that's all in the past. Why should we dig it up? I have no regrets. Now I am absolutely happy. And the most important thing. In the past, you worked as a senior accountant, and now you have a network of handmade clothing stores. How did that happen? You know, while I was lying in the hospital for 3 months, I couldn't work at all. I had a sick leave for that time. But sometimes I got so bored, so I asked Sergio to bring me knitting needles and yarn. I started knitting socks, hats, gloves, and simple things like that. Then, when I continued working from home, I couldn't give up my hobby. I also started sewing clothes. Sergio suggested making custom-made items, advertising them on the internet, and selling them through a website. I thought, why not? Of course, I couldn't manage it alone after some time. Orders kept increasing, and I couldn't handle it. So, I hired people. Most of them are moms on maternity leave who sew good clothes in their free time, and I buy them from them. There are also professional tailors. Now we have quite a team. We started getting popular on the internet, and then we opened several offline stores. It's ambitious to call it a network, but now we have 5 shops in the capital, and I hope we keep growing. A deadly illness, surgery, husband's betrayal, a new love, starting a business, having a daughter, and all of this in just 4 years. Teodora, how do you manage to do it all? It's true, how do I manage to do it all? Sometimes I ask myself the same question, she smiled. There's no secret, really. I just learned to set priorities and always do only what truly matters to me, discarding what I don't need. What would you like to say to our viewers as a farewell message? Never give up, believe in yourself, and remember that it's always darkest before the dawn. If you think this is the worst thing happening in your life, maybe you are mistaken, and it's actually the best thing you've been waiting for all along. You will make it through. Teodora, just look at her. Rodrigo thought to himself. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to take something heavy and smash the TV, but he was too drunk and fell asleep during the show. Several weeks later, Fernanda settled the inheritance, and 2 months after that, she sold the apartment and used part of the money to buy her brother a room. She couldn't leave him on the streets. After all, he was still her family. Rodrigo had enough occasional odd jobs to pay for utilities and buy modest food, and he didn't need much more than that. Teodora and Sergio completed building their big countryside house, where they moved from the apartment with Teodora's mom and their little daughter. They had never imagined they could be so happy. Teodora hardly remembered about Rodrigo. He and the years spent with him were forever left in her past.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.